Ciao.
That's sponsored by Remote HQ. Collaborate like you're in the same room. Go to remotehq.co/minutes for a free trial. And when you're ready to launch, use the code MINUTES for 3 months free. That's Remote HQ.
G.I. Joe can help it. Roadblock, Deep Six, hold off those his tanks. Yo, Joe! Hat muffs, spit take, shoot down those rat players.
Half the battle, that's the other thing. And knowing that is half the battle. We left that off yesterday.
Oh, yes, the more you know.
Peter Cohen is here with us, everybody. Peter Cohen. Yeah, you know Peter. And 20 years of tech journalism, as he said. Guest on this show quite a bit. I can't remember, by the way, which day it is. It's either today or tomorrow, but marks the 1-year anniversary of this show. Not this show being public, because I want to say I did this show for like 8 weeks before I put it out on Apple Podcasts or any place else. I was just woodshedding, just trying it out. But you were the very first person I called, and that's why I wanted to have you back on this week. So thank you very much for being here and starting all this mishigas.
Narnia.gif. Do not cite the old magic to me, which I was there when it was written.
There you go. Exactly. If anybody ever says, let me tell you something about in a few minutes, you can be like, let me tell you something. I was on it before it even had a name, by golly. And some would argue it still doesn't. So Monday normally is It's News to Peter, but we did something else on Monday. So Tuesday this week, It's News to Peter. I'm curious, Peter Cohen, when I turn to you and say, what is news to Peter Cohen? What is the story that interests Peter? Peter Cohen says,
Tom Warren wrote a story that really interested me, talking about how Windows 7, a year right after Microsoft has completely discontinued support for it, still commands like 20% market share on the PC side. You know, we talk a lot about fragmentation, or we have over the years. We've talked a lot about fragmentation on Android, but I don't think we've paid as much attention to it on Windows as well. And it's just really interesting to me that that many people are still running such an antiquated operating system. On the other hand, I get it. You know, if it works, you know, don't fix it. If it ain't broke.
Well, it doesn't work, though. Because, I mean, there's no way those people are being protected by security updates or things like that at this point.
Maybe they don't need it.
Of course they need it.
Maybe their use cases are so limited they just don't care.
Oh, well, they might not care. They might not realize they need it, but they need it. I mean, that's one of the biggest things that a lot of times on the Checklist, which is the show that I host and produce for the guys over at Secure Mac, a lot of times we're just, trying to drill the same stuff into people over and over again. Things like, don't use the same password repeatedly. A good anti-malware software suite is, something you probably want to hold on to. Don't use the same passwords over again repeatedly. And then sometimes we mention to people they shouldn't use the same passwords over again repeatedly. I mean, there are things that people don't realize that they need, like security updates, for example. And if you're telling me that they're like,
here's the thing, though. Windows 7, runs on what is it, 100 million active PCs around the world.
Okay.
Those are 100 million active PCs that are doing their thing day in and day out running Windows 7 already. Yeah, they're not getting system updates. They're not getting security updates. Yeah. They're not getting patched. They're hideously open to all sorts of malware threats and keyloggers and other stuff. And it's horrible, but they're still functioning. They're still doing the things that they were there put to do. There's something to be said for the Timex resiliency of, computers that'll run forever. It makes me wonder, though, in 40 or 50 years, how much of this digital detritus is still going to be following us? What kind of slime trail are we going to be leaving ourselves behind with legacy systems that continue to hang on by a thread, giving, some layer of the population some form of access to the information infrastructure that everyone else who's sufficiently more advanced to have better systems are using? This is an ongoing problem, and this is an evolutionary issue that we're going to have to deal with indefinitely.
Let me do 3 things really quickly. First of all, I assumed that when you said, we'll circle back to that. Have you ever read the book Rainbow's End by Werner Vinge?
Now, of course, yeah, it's a classic.
Yeah, and so his whole thing where, his guy comes out of the coma and he ends up adopting to the brand new technology, and there are these people that he's working with who are still walking around with laptops, and we're talking like 20 or 30 years in the future, and they're all excited they can still do all of this stuff with their laptops, and he's looking at them like, schmuck, because while they can still do it, they're not getting nearly the same sort of functionality. I just found that kind of interesting. It doesn't really tie into what you were saying exactly. What ties in more with what you're saying...
Fire Upon the Deep, by the way, is one of the best SF novels ever written.
Oh.
If you haven't read it, go get it.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, Rainbow's End is an okay book. It's an okay book, in my opinion. A Fire Upon the Deep and A Deepness in the Sky are two absolutely fantastic novels. And the rest of his stuff is kind of interesting if you want to be completionist. But A Fire Upon the Deep and A Deepness in the Sky, they're...
His magnum opus.
He's also the guy who gave us the technological singularity. I mean, not literally, but he was the first person to use that term and to write the first essay on it. It's kind of funny because Kurzweil has written like 2 or 3 huge books on it. The first essay on the technological singularity was maybe 4 pages long, and brilliant and scary, and then updated around 2006, I think. But whatever. Yeah. The second thing was earlier this year, or last year now, because it's 2021, when we went into lockdown, and then they were like, right, we're going to push out, when we're going to collect taxes and things like that. All of a sudden, they're looking for people who write Cobalt. Wasn't it Cobalt? COBOL?
Yeah.
How do you even say it? Because here was this programming language that's not completely forgotten, but is certainly not, one that a lot of people are turning themselves to at this point. And yet a large portion of the federal government was like, do we know anybody? Because we don't have people. We're still using this legacy tech. We'll go back to looking through old windows in a moment, but first a word from Remote HQ, letting you collaborate as if you're in the same room. With other people, I mean. Here's what Remote HQ gives you. Note-taking, a whiteboard, access to apps you're already using like Miro and Dropbox and Google Docs and others. I mean, all that's great, but you've already got all those things. What Remote HQ really gives you is a place to work together. You can set the apps so you're the only one that controls them, but the real trick is leaving them open, so your teammates can add notes, take you to a website they want you to see, add to the stuff that you've put on the whiteboard as if you're in the same room. All of this with no downloads, no installations. Meeting participants don't even have to sign up for anything. They just click the link you send, kind of like you pulled them into a meeting, not had to go get them a badge. Go to remotehq.co/minutes for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch, use the code MINUTES for 3 months free. Give Remote HQ a try. Go to remotehq.co/minutes for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch, use the code MINUTES for 3 months free. And now, back to Windows 7, which is news to Peter Cohen. When you said that was going to be your story, I assumed you were going to be horrified that people were still using this legacy tech. You almost sound like you're standing in awe/homage of the fact that this thing that's so old is still being the workhorse that it needs to be for these people.
Here's the parallel for me as an Apple user. I'm an Intel Mac user. I haven't switched to an M1 processor yet, and I don't know really when I'm going to have the budget to do it, or really the wherewithal to do it. Mm-hmm. There's certainly, there's endless internal justifications for me to want to get one, but I really can't justify it because my kid is working okay. Now, look, I've been through this a couple of times before. This ain't my first rodeo when it comes to a processor switch on the Mac. I know what's coming. I know that I've got maybe a 2 or 3 year window, a finite opportunity to use Rosetta 2 and Big Sur and make that transition. Before Apple kind of pushes you along and says, hey, look, you know what? You're using legacy stuff. You're going to stay in the past. And this is, the snapshot of where you're going to be from now on. Or you can upgrade and, come back to the promised land. I get it. I've gone through that whole thing before. And the Windows 7 thing kind of framed it for me. And, it's interesting that whether we're talking about Apple or talking about Microsoft, like I said, there is this very evolutionary process, or Windows, or Google, Android, or iOS. there's this very natural evolutionary process that happens as tech is upgraded and changed, where there's just some people who just get left behind or get sort of dragged along. And their experience using this stuff and depending on this stuff is typically very different than people who are, leading the charge on the bleeding edge on the other side of it. My son was actually contextualizing this for me. There's this game called Cyberpunk 2077 that's been making a lot of headlines in the game business lately. It's got Keanu Reeves in it, and it's just a big deal.
Yeah.
Really kind of problematic rollout on the PS5 on the PS4 as well. But the point that he made to me was, hey, look, I've got a PC gaming rig with one of the new cards that just came out this past year. I'm not having any of the problems that people on the lower side of the food chain are having when it comes to getting the game to run and run really well. So people are having a lot of problems with it, and I'm hearing a lot of reports that it's buggy. But you know what? They targeted it for my hardware, and I'm having a better experience. That is the same experience that people who buy an iPhone 12 today are having compared to people who are still using an iPhone 6S, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's just the other end of that experience. It's the same parallel that we all have, and it's interesting to watch because it happens over and over and over again. What is it? The line from Battlestar Galactica: "This has happened before, and it'll happen again."
Yeah, the one concern I have, and I know you're saying it does fine for those people, the one concern I have is if they're so far out and if they're not getting patched, then who knows what other technical problems they have in their lives they don't even know about. I mean, do they have one of the, quote, smart, end quote, light bulbs that can be used as part of a DDoS attack, or are they the kind of people who are also using the same password for every one of their accounts? I mean, I worry.
Yeah.
I worry about it not being... And the problem is I don't want it to be like, well, you're now at risk, so spend $600, $700, $1,000 you weren't planning on spending. I don't want that to be the solution. At the same time, I don't want, ne'er-do-wells to have access to all of their accounts when all they use it for is to go online and pay a few bills. And does that, does they're holding on to legacy tech end up giving up the game?
Think about how cholera spread in London.
Well, I can't right now because I'm too busy thinking about how COVID-19 is not spreading to my house. How do you mean? My
point is that that you have poor sanitation and poor hygiene, and you're going to get disease spreading. This is the digital equivalent of that. It's the open sewer of the internet.
Well, that's gross.